The hallway light buzzed overhead as my fiancé's brother pulled me aside, his grip trembling against my arm. Still, the word fiancé tasted sour the moment he whispered that marrying Alex could cost me everything. As my legs shook, the laughter from our rehearsal dinner sounded like a celebration for a life I might lose. While the buzzing light flickered, my heartbeat synced with its warning pulse. The same whisper about his brother, my future husband, cut deeper than any truth I expected. That's when I understood. The danger wasn't the wedding, it was the man waiting at the end of the aisle. Before we start, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. If you enjoy the story, please hit like, subscribe, and join our community. It really helps us grow. The carpet cleaner hit me first, sharp chemical, almost sweet, mixing with the faint aroma of leftover champagne drifting from the ballroom. I'd stepped into the hallway just to breathe, to get away from the heat of too many bodies and the pressure of too many eyes waiting for me to perform the role of perfect bride. I was standing near the humming ice machine, feeling the cold air brush my bare arms, when I heard a quick set of footsteps behind me. Before I could turn, a hand closed around my elbow, not hard but urgent. I startled, and there was Evan, Alex's older brother, his face ghost pale under the hallway sconces. "If you marry my brother tomorrow," he whispered, breath tight and uneven, "you might lose more than your last name." My knees actually dipped. I felt the hallway tilt just a little, the carpet blurring for a second under my heels. It took me a moment to find my voice. "Evan, what are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes kept darting toward the ballroom doors, where a burst of laughter spilled out, Alex's laughter, smooth and confident, the kind that filled rooms and made people lean toward him. Evan flinched at the sound, as if it snapped a deadline tight around his throat. "Hannah," he said quietly, "you need to check your credit report. Tonight, if you can, look for any inquiries or loan documents you don't recognize, anything tied to Mason Developments." My stomach clenched. Loan documents, why? He shook his head, jaw stiff. "Just do it, please. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't." He stopped. Suddenly his posture straightened. I saw the reason a second later. Diane Mason, in her jeweled shawl and perfume that always smelled like pressed lilies and cold disapproval, stepped into the hallway. Her lips curved into something like a smile, but the muscles in her face didn't move with it. "There you are," she said to me, her tone dipped in velvet and ice. "Everyone's waiting, dear. Time to come back inside. Pictures are about to start." Then she turned her gaze to Evan. The smile didn't move, but her eyes tightened in a way that made the hairs on my arms rise. "Evan," she said, with a warning hidden in every syllable. He stepped back instantly, hands disappearing into his pockets like he was tucking the truth away with them. I wanted to grab him, force him to finish what he'd started, but my voice was gone, swallowed by that look Diane shot between us. I followed her inside, my pulse ringing in my ears like someone tapping a spoon against glass. The ballroom was warm and golden, candles flickering over linen-draped tables and half-empty wine glasses. The music was soft jazz. Someone's bracelet clinked against a champagne flute. Alex spotted me and walked over, smiling wide for the photographer hovering nearby. "There you are," he murmured, slipping his arm around my waist. It was supposed to be affectionate, but his fingers dug just slightly, like he was reminding me who I was standing with. "Everything okay?" I opened my mouth, but he didn't wait. "Let me guess," he said lightly, loud enough for the guests around us. "Evan cornered you with more of his doom and gloom warnings." A couple people chuckled, eyes flicking toward me. "He's always been jealous. Don't let negative people ruin our night." I swallowed. He said, "Babe," he whispered, tightening his grip again, "you worry too much. Seriously, just smile." He raised his glass dramatically. Someone clapped. The photographer snapped a picture. I stood there, smiling on command, my ribs pressing into his palm, while his friends joked that I'd be reading wedding blogs until sunrise, the sweet little worrier bride. Every word felt like a hand pushing me gently, insistently back into place. The toast started, glasses clinking, silverware scraping, people laughing at stories I'd normally find charming. But all I could hear was Evan's voice repeating, "Check your credit. Look for Mason Developments." The room glowed around me, but it all felt wrong, like I was watching my own life from outside a window. I kept nodding and smiling and thanking people for being there, but inside something had shifted, a quiet, cold certainty settling under my ribs. Evan had tried to warn me about, it wasn't nothing. And I was going to find out what it was before I walked down any aisle. The door clicked shut behind me with that soft, heavy thud only hotel doors make, final padded like the world outside no longer applied. I leaned back against it for a second, breathing in the faint scent of stale air conditioning and old carpet, my makeup tight and smudged along my cheekbones. My scalp hurt from hours of bobby pins pulled too tight, and when I finally tugged one loose, it pinged onto the floor like a tiny piece of shrapnel. I had barely kicked off my heels when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A sharp, insistent vibration. I thought it was Alex maybe checking if I'd made it to bed. Instead, the subject line on the email glowed up at me. Action required, new credit inquiry detected. My stomach dropped so fast I actually sat down, just folded onto the edge of the bed in my still-zipped rehearsal dress, the satin creasing under me. My hands were shaking as I opened the email. A large mortgage-style inquiry. From a bank I had never even heard of. Dated 2 weeks ago. For a second, I just stared at the screen, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something reasonable. They didn't. A heat rose up my neck, the kind that felt like warning sirens. I reached for my laptop on the desk, nearly knocking over the tiny hotel water bottle they charged $10 for. The keyboard felt gritty under my fingertips from the makeup powder I'd gotten on everything earlier. I logged into my credit report, heart pounding so loudly it felt like it shook the room. And there it was. A new account pending, not small, not harmless. A line of credit so large I actually blinked to make sure I wasn't hallucinating it, and buried inside the description as if it thought it could sneak past me. Mason Dev Holdings. My fiancé's family business. My throat went dry. I hadn't applied for anything. Not a loan, not a card, not a single financial move in months. I'd been too busy taste testing cakes and choosing centerpieces while Alex teased me about micromanaging the unimportant stuff. So why was my credit tied to his family's company? My fingers moved without me thinking. I hit call. He picked up on the fourth ring, the background noise thumping through the speaker, bass-heavy music, glasses clinking, someone shouting something about shots. His voice came in loose, carefree, drenched in the kind of energy people only have when everything in their world is going exactly how they want. Babe, everything okay? I had to swallow. There's a credit inquiry on my report, something huge, something tied to Mason Dev. Oh my gods, he laughed, cutting me off. Hannah, you're reading it wrong. The laugh wasn't gentle. It wasn't reassuring. It was the laugh of someone who'd already decided your concerns were adorable and irrelevant. I'm literally looking at it, I said. It's a real account, it's pending. These systems glitch all the time, he said. I could hear one of the groomsmen in the background yelling his name. Seriously, babe, stop doom scrolling, go to sleep, you'll look exhausted tomorrow. My skin prickled. Alex, I'm not misreading it, it's tied to your family S. He sighed long and theatrical. You're being dramatic as usual, I'm the one who works in business, remember, not you, I'll look at it tomorrow. Then, before I could respond, he lowered his voice just enough to make it sting. My friends are waiting, try to relax for once, okay? And he hung up. Just like that. The room felt colder after the call ended, like the humming of the AC unit was the only thing aware I was still sitting there, staring at numbers that made no sense and a name that made even less. The satin near my shoulder itched. My reflection in the dark laptop screen looked more like someone in a costume than a bride. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode if I dropped it. I wasn't imagining this, I wasn't overreacting. Evan's warning wasn't paranoia. I sat there for a long minute, listening to the low mechanical hum beneath the silence, and made a decision that felt like slipping out of a fog. I was calling the bank the second they opened in the morning, even if it meant being late to my own wedding prep. Sunrise slipped through the thin hotel curtains in pale, watery strips, the kind of light that made everything look softer than it really was. I sat cross-legged on the carpet in my pajamas, hair a tangled mess, my veil still zipped inside its garment bag like a future I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. My phone was pressed to my ear, tinny hold music chirping in loops that made my nerves twitch. The carpet smelled faintly of leftover perfume and industrial cleaner. My stomach was a tight, aching knot, like it was bracing for impact before I even knew what the impact was. A soft click and then a woman's voice came through the line, bright, efficient, too awake for 6 in TH. Morning. Thanks for holding. Can you verify your name and last 4 digits of your social? I gave her the information, wiping my clammy palm against my pajama pants. The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was sharp. She hummed, the kind people make when scanning through pages they already think they understand better than you. Okay, she said finally. I'm seeing a joint application for a line of credit associated with a new development project. Quite a large one. Your name and signature are both present on the file. My breath stuttered. I never signed anything like that. There was a tiny pause, barely 2 seconds, but I felt it like a judgment. Then her tone shifted into something overly patient, slightly condescending, as if she were talking to someone easily confused. Sometimes paperwork gets signed during other processes, she said. Loan pre-approvals, mortgage discussions, perhaps your husband-to-be handled it and you may have forgotten. It happens. No, I said, sharper than I expected. I didn't sign anything, and definitely not with Mason Developments. She hesitated again. Well, let me send you the signature page, you can review it yourself. An email pinged immediately. I opened it with shaking fingers. A scanned page filled the screen, my printed name, my supposed signature right below it. Clean, confident. Except the loop on the H, it was wrong. The exact wrong loop Alex always exaggerated when he joked about my signature during dinner parties, imitating me to get laughs. I felt something cold bloom under my ribs. That's not mine, I whispered. It looks similar, but it's not mine. Ms. Walker, she said, voice rounding into polite dismissal. It is very common for spouses to submit joint documentation when planning a large purchase or investment. I didn't sign it, I repeated louder this time. My pulse thudded against my jaw. I want this flagged immediately. She cleared her throat. I can make a note that you're disputing the signature, but we'll need to open a review process and that can take. But I wasn't listening anymore. I ended the call as soon as she finished her practice script. I dialed Alex. He answered on the third ring, rustling in the background, voices muffled, the faint scraping sound of hangers or garment bags. Babe, I'm in the bridal suite area. Can this wait? No, it can't, my voice cracked. They sent the document. My signature is forged, Alex. Someone forged my signature on a giant line of credit tied to your family's company. He let out a breathy, irritated sound. Hannah, we are literally about to start wedding prep. This is not the time to spiral about paperwork. I'm not spiraling, I'm telling you it's fraud. Oh my God, he muttered. We'll talk about this later. You always pick the worst possible moment. Then, without even a goodbye, he hung up. The phone slipped a little in my hand. A firm knock rattled the door. Hannah, sweetheart, Diane's voice floated in, sweetened but brittle. I opened the door and she swept in with a garment bag, the smell of her floral perfume filling the room instantly. Hair and makeup are waiting. We don't have time for whatever is stressing you this morning. She gave me a tight, polished smile, the kind that said don't make a scene, and began unzipping the garment bag with brisk movements. You shouldn't worry your pretty head about business things, she murmured, smoothing the bodice of my dress like she was prepping a mannequin. Today is about looking beautiful. As she fussed with the fabric, pulling it into shape, I felt myself shrinking inside the dress, as if I were being wrapped into a costume, not a commitment. Her fingers tugged and adjusted and pressed, but her eyes never actually saw me. Something hardened in my chest. The moment she left the room, even before the door clicked shut, I opened my email again. I forwarded the document to my Aunt Laura. No explanation, just the attachment. And then I sat very still, waiting for the fallout I could feel coming, like the air right before a storm breaks. The bridal prep room felt too bright, the kind of blinding white light that made everything look softer in photos but harsher in real life. Hairspray hung in the air like a glittery fog, mixing with the sweetness of fresh roses and the faint metallic scent of the curling irons heating on the counter. My dress rustled every time I shifted, the fabric stiff and heavy against my ribs. Everyone else seemed ecstatic, gushing, squealing, taking pictures. Everyone except me. My phone buzzed on the counter again and again. The screen lit up with Aunt Laura's name, then my email app, then an unknown number I suspected was the bank. No one else looked at it, no one else even heard it over the music and chatter. But I heard every vibration like a heartbeat I couldn't steady. Jade caught my eye from across the vanity table. She was holding a mimosa, lipstick half applied, but her smile faded when she saw my face. What? Han, you okay? You look off. Before I could answer, Diane materialized behind me, her reflection sharp in the mirror. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on my cheek, patting me like I was 6. She's just emotional, she cooed to Jade, not even looking at me. Every bride gets overwhelmed, it's nerves, sweetheart. I pulled my face away gently, but she'd already turned to adjust a flower arrangement, dismissing my fear like it was nothing more than misplaced mascara. The bridesmaids kept laughing, music thumping low from a portable speaker someone had set near the makeup brushes. Someone was trying to teach another bridesmaid a TikTok dance. Mimosas clinked. Everyone played their part in the fantasy. Except me. The door opened and the photographer breezed in, followed by Alex in his tailored suit, smiling wide like the cameras were currency. The room erupted in excited squeals, first look, and I had to steady myself on the back of a chair. He came straight to me, grinning like this was the best moment of his life. His eyes traveled up and down the dress, and the photographer snapped photos immediately, telling him to whisper something cute in my ear. Alex leaned in, smile frozen for the camera. You'd better not ruin this day, he whispered, voice sharp and low against my cheek. No more paranoid stories about signatures and bank people, okay? The photographer cooed, aw, adorable. My skin crawled. I saw the document, I whispered. My signature, Alex, it's clearly forged, and the account is huge, I don't understand why. He cut me off by adjusting my necklace, still smiling for the lens. Hannah, we're a team, he murmured. I just streamlined things, your credit's cleaner than mine after that old student debt mess. It made the process easier. I never agreed to anything, I said, my voice barely audible over the camera shutter. His hand tightened slightly on my waist before smoothing the fabric, every gesture perfectly choreographed for the photos. You'll benefit from the project too, he whispered. And if you call things off now, you're not just humiliating me, you're embarrassing everyone. You'll make my family think you're unstable. The words landed like poison disguised as reassurance, and the smile never left his face. Beautiful, the photographer said, perfect moment, hold it. And in front of everyone, Jade, the bridesmaids, the planner who just walked in, Alex kissed my forehead dramatically, as if comforting his nervous little bride. The room cooed. Phones came out to capture the sweet moment. The image they saw was tenderness. Inside, I felt something closing around me, tight as the bodice of my dress. A costume, not a commitment. A role, not a relationship. The planner poked her head in. Guests are arriving, ceremony starts in 25 minutes. Everyone scattered, touching up lipstick, adjusting dresses, squealing again. Alex gave me one last squeeze. Smile, he whispered, you're fine. But I was. My phone buzzed again on the counter, Aunt Laura. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. I didn't know the whole truth yet. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't walking down that aisle until Aunt Laura saw everything and told me exactly what hell I was standing. And the side office wasn't even a real room, just a narrow space with a desk pushed against the wall, a single lamp, and the faint smell of copier ink. I slipped inside, shut the door, and locked it with a soft click that felt louder than the chatter outside. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. The lace sleeve of my dress snagged on the doorknob, and I had to tug myself free, breath stuttering. I scrolled through my inbox, searching, scroll, until Aunt Laura's name appeared at the top with a subject line that punched straight through my stomach. Call me now. There were attachments, multiple PDFs. The icons alone made my vision prick. I hit call. She answered on the first ring. No hello, just my name, said in a tone I'd only ever heard her use when discussing predatory lenders or corrupt landlords. Hannah. My throat tightened. What's happening? What did you find? I pulled the public filings and the loan documents, she said, her voice thin, controlled. There is a formal line of credit listing you as a co-borrower with Mason Developments. It's already in process. They used your social security number. I pressed a hand to my chest. I could feel my heartbeat through the fabric of my dress, too fast, too hard, like something trying to break out. I didn't sign anything, I whispered. I didn't agree to anything. I know, she said, and that's the problem. Someone forged your signature. Someone who had enough of your personal information to make it look legitimate. Either Alex, his father, or a staff member acting on their behalf. Papers shuffled on her end, sharp, accusing sounds. This isn't a clerical error, Hannah, it's fraud. She sent another email. My phone buzzed in my palm. Open the PDF, she said. My fingers trembled as I tapped the screen. The document expanded, my name in bold print, a signature that mimicked my handwriting just enough to be dangerous. And then, I had to blink twice. My grandmother's duplex, listed under a vague line of text, potential future collateral consideration. My voice broke. They can't even access it, it's in the trust. They shouldn't be able to, Aunt Laura said. But the fact they listed it means they're either planning to challenge the trust later or convince you to unlock it once you're married. They are positioning you as the asset, Hannah, you and everything tied to your name. My head spun, the edges of the room blurred. While I'd been obsessing over table linens and escort cards, they had been preparing paperwork, actual legal documents behind my back. I imagined them in some sleek conference room, pens scratching, using my name like currency while I tasted frosting samples. The dream wedding, the perfect photos, the endless talk about our bright future, all of it suddenly felt like misdirection. Smoke, gloss, a distraction to keep me from asking the wrong questions. A muffled voice drifted through the door, Diane's, sharp, irritated. We're running behind. She gets sensitive when she's overwhelmed. Just give her a minute. Sensitive. Like I was a fragile decoration they needed to handle carefully so I didn't crack before pictures. Someone outside laughed, awkward, pitying. I felt myself shrink even though no one could see me. The organist began warming up in the chapel, slow notes drifting through the hallway like a soundtrack to a life I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. A knock followed, light but hurried. Hannah, the coordinator, called softly. We're lining up in 5, are you ready? Ready. I looked back at the PDF, the looping false signature, the number strings of my social printed beside a debt I never agreed to. The duplex, my one inherited safety net, listed like bait on a hook. If I walked out there now, if I said I do, I wouldn't just be agreeing to a marriage. I'd be stepping into a legal trap with my eyes shut. My voice barely worked. 1 minute, I called back. I grabbed my veil from the chair. It felt heavier than it had that morning, and my hand brushed the delicate tool like I was touching something that wasn't mine anymore. Then I typed 3 words to Aunt Laura. Don't let them touch the duplex. I hit send. My legs shook as I unlocked the door, as if the hallway held a different gravity now. Nothing about this wedding, this day, this life I thought I was stepping into could stay the same. And I walked out of that office, knowing the truth had already cracked the entire fantasy open. I found him near the side of the chapel, straightening his cufflinks while guests murmured just beyond the thin wall. The organist was still warming up, slow, wavering notes that made the whole hallway feel like it was holding its breath. My dress rustled as I moved, the floral perfume rising off the fabric, mixing with the dusty smell of storage rooms and old hymn books stacked nearby. Alex, I whispered, grabbing his sleeve, come with me now. He frowned, confused, but followed. I pushed open the nearest door, a storage room barely big enough for metal shelves and leftover ceremony candles, and pulled him inside. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing us into a dim pocket of stale air and shadow. His irritation appeared instantly. What is this? He snapped, brushing dust from his suit. Then he saw my phone screen lit, the forged documents open, and his expression twisted. Hannah, why are you doing this right before the ceremony? My hand shook as I held up the screen. Because these are real, Alex. Aunt Laura pulled the filings. My name is on a line of credit, my signature is forged, and my duplex is mentioned. Why? Why is my grandmother's property in your family's loan paperwork? He rolled his eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. That's a template error, relax. It's not an error, I said. It's in multiple documents. Fine, he snapped, voice low so no one outside could hear. Then my dad's lawyers will fix it. They know what they're doing. That's not an answer, I said. Who put my name on this? Who signed for me? He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Hannah, God, you make everything so dramatic. I handled it for us, because you never take initiative with these things. I blinked. Handled what? The grown-up decisions, he muttered. You get overwhelmed by anything financial. You're always scared of risk. Someone has to move things forward. Each sentence landed like a slap, mocking, minimizing, rewriting reality so smoothly I almost lost my footing. I'm scared of risk, I said, voice cracking, or you just didn't want me asking questions. He scoffed. I streamlined the process. You would have frozen and second-guessed everything, and honestly, you should be thanking me instead of accusing me on our wedding day. My vision tightened at the edges. You forged my signature, Alex. You tied my social to a multi-$100,000 project without telling me. You tried to link my duplex, my grandmother's duplex, to your family's debt. Hannah, stop. He stepped closer, jaw clenched. You're blowing this out of proportion. I saw the documents, I whispered. I'm not marrying someone who does this, I'm not. Something in his face shifted like a mask slipping. His eyes hardened, cold and sharp. He grabbed my wrist, not enough to bruise but enough to make my skin burn. You walk out now, he hissed, and you will humiliate me. You'll humiliate my family. You'll make yourself look crazy in front of everyone out there. My breath caught, the candles stacked on the shelves flickered, their faint vanilla scent suddenly suffocating. He tightened his grip. You think anyone will believe you over us, over me? You're being irrational and people will see that. For a moment I froze. The girl he expected, quiet, agreeable, grateful, almost surfaced out of habit. Then something steadier rose in me. I yanked my arm free. The sound of my skin slipping from his grip echoed in the cramped room like a snap of truth. I'm not going into that chapel, I said, voice shaking but unmistakably clear. And the next time you hear from me, it'll be through my aunt. His face drained. Oh, Hannah. And a fraud complaint, I finished. I didn't wait for his response. I reached for the door, my hand trembling, and stepped out into the hallway, away from the candles, away from him, away from the life he tried to trap me in. The back exit door thudded shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gavel. Cold air rushed over my overheated skin, slipping under the half-unzipped gown, raising goosebumps along my spine. My dress snagged on the metal frame for a second before tearing free with a soft rip I didn't have the energy to care about. Instead of walking down the flower-lined aisle, I walked past rows of parked cars, shiny SUVs, sedans with just married stickers waiting nearby, exhaust fumes from a catering van drifting into the crisp morning. My heels clicked unevenly on the pavement as I held fistfuls of tulle to keep from tripping, the whole thing feeling like I was escaping a movie set I'd accidentally been cast in. My phone began buzzing, once, twice, then continuously. Alex, Diane, unknown numbers from the venue. And then Jade. Where are you? Are you okay? People are whispering, did something happen? Everyone wanted answers from the bride who dared to run. My stomach twisted, and for a moment I wondered if I should turn back. If I was overreacting, if I was making a spectacle, if every accusation Alex had thrown at me was about to come true. Then my phone buzzed again. Alex, you're making a huge mistake. Alex, come back inside. Alex, don't ruin this for both of us. And beneath all of that, the forged documents lived like a bruise on my screen. A car horn chirped Aunt Laura's signal. She pulled around to the back like we'd planned in two frantic texts. I yanked the door open and climbed into the backseat, the gown ballooning awkwardly around me. My veil was half falling off. I pulled it loose completely and dropped it beside me like shedding a disguise. Aunt Laura didn't ask questions. She just reached over, squeezed my hand, and said, "Give me the phone." I handed it over. Watching her scroll through the PDFs, the bank emails, the scanned signature was like watching someone read the autopsy of a relationship I hadn't realized was already dead. She exhaled slowly. Okay, first your duplex is protected, the trust is solid, they might have been planning to challenge it later, but for now it holds. A knot inside me loosened just slightly, so they can't take it. No, not without you helping them, and you won't. Her tone sharpened. But the fact they listed it as potential collateral, that is a massive red flag. It shows intent. She tapped the document with one manicured nail. This is fraud, Hannah, and we need to move now. Shame and relief washed together in my chest, warm, heavy, confusing. I'd almost stood at an altar with a man who saw me as paperwork, and yet some foolish part of me still felt guilty for running. What do we do? My voice was barely above a whisper. Emergency notices, she said. We call the bank's fraud department, notify the credit bureaus, freeze your reports, and have everything timestamped. If you'd signed a marriage certificate today, she shook her head. This would be 10 times harder. My phone buzzed again. Then again. The notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Alex, we can fix this. Alex, stop being dramatic. Alex, you're overreacting. Alex, you just ruined my life. And finally, no one will believe your version. Aunt Laura saw the messages appear and handed the phone back to me. Save every one of those, she said. Screenshots, backups, everything, it's evidence. She pulled a legal pad from her briefcase. Yes, she brought her briefcase to my almost wedding and began drafting a timeline, pen scratching calmly while my hands shook. Outside the window, I could still hear faint music drifting from the chapel speakers. Guests were probably standing, confused, checking their programs, whispering about the bride who disappeared. I took a shaky breath. I wasn't going to hide from the humiliation. I wasn't going to apologize for seeing the trap before I stepped into it. I was going to document every lie, every message, every forged line. And let the truth do what it needed to do. By the time I stumbled into my apartment, the sky outside had shifted into that dull, bluish darkness thaw. Tea comes right before midnight. I was still half in wedding hair, stiff curls pinned into a shape that no longer made sense, and streaks of makeup clung to my cheeks like bruises. My dress was stuffed into a garment bag I hadn't fully zipped, its tulle spilling out like something trying to escape. The silence of my apartment hit harder than the cold air. No music, no guests, no photographer clicking, just the hum of my refrigerator and my own uneven breathing. I plugged in my dying phone, the screen flickering weakly, and opened my photo album. All I saw were engagement pictures, venue mood boards, screenshots of dresses, texts where I told friends I was sure Alex and I would figure out married life together. A life I'd almost walked into blind. The front door flew open before I could fall too far down that hole. Jade burst in without knocking, hair wild, coat half on. What the hell, Hannah? She gasped. Why did you leave me at the altar? I was standing there like an idiot. People were whispering, are you hurt? Are you crazy? What? She finally got a full look at me, puffy eyes, ruined makeup, hands shaking as I held my phone, and her anger cracked. What happened? She said softer. Talk to me. I handed her the screen. The forged loan documents. The bank emails. Alex's messages calling me dramatic, naive, unstable. Jade sank onto the couch like her legs gave out. He did all of this behind your back. He used my signature, I whispered. My social, my property. Her jaw clenched. She looked like she wanted to punch something. We scrolled together through the screenshots Aunt Laura told me to save, each one more sickening than the last. My phone buzzed as we worked, calls from Alex, messages from his mother, even a passive-aggressive "Are you safe?" from one of his cousins. Then, mid-scroll, a notification banner slid across the top of my screen. "Vey 2 hearts, miss you already." I froze. Who is that? Jade's head snapped toward the alert. Why does she have heart emojis? Hannah, click it. My throat tightened. It's locked, it won't open without his passcode. Jade stared at me like I was forgetting something obvious. His passcode, the one he bragged you'd never guess because it was too clever, try it. He had bragged, he de-smirked about it at dinner once, teasing me for not being techie enough to ever figure it out. I typed it in the date of his first big business deal, a moment he loved more than any memory we shared. The screen opened. His cloud backup synced in seconds. And then the messages appeared. Long threads, photos, voice memos, all between Alex and a woman saved in his contacts only as V2 hearts. My vision blurred as I scrolled. She's so easy to manage. Good girl doesn't ask questions. Her credit score is insane. This project will fly once the paperwork clears. Wedding equals green light. You and I will celebrate once the deal is locked. Jade covered her mouth. Oh my God. He'd been sleeping with her for months, mocking me, using me, treating me like a financial tool wrapped in lace and optimism. And worst of all, they talked about me like I was an obstacle, not a partner. The late nights, the urgent meetings, the times he'd called me the wrong nickname and laughed it off. It all snapped into place so painfully I almost doubled over. I forwarded every damning message to myself, then to Aunt Laura. Each forwarded screenshot felt like another piece of ice forming where my heartbreak had been. My sadness hardened into something sharper, something steadier. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just cheating. This was identity theft dressed up as a relationship. While Jade put the kettle on, the smell of tea rising into my tiny kitchen, she said quietly, "They think they can spin this. They think they can bury it." I looked up from my phone, jaw set. "They can try," I said, "but when this comes out, it won't be a whisper." Jade nodded, eyes fierce. "They're going to be confronted," she said, "exactly where they care about appearances the most." And in that moment, I knew she was right. The reception hall didn't look anything like it did yesterday. The lights were too bright, the flowers already wilting, and the tables, once set for a celebration, had been rearranged into a long, makeshift tribunal. I walked in wearing jeans, sneakers, and a black blazer, my hair pulled back in a low knot. No gown, no veil, no trembling smile. Just me. Alex's parents sat at the head of the table like offended royalty. Richard's arms were crossed, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. Diane wore a silk blouse and a tight expression, lips pinched like she was smelling something sour. Alex sat to their right, suit rumpled, eyes ringed with fatigue, but he still plastered on that familiar smirk, the one he used to charm waiters, investors, and anyone he needed to manipulate. A cluster of aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the remaining seats, leaning in, whispering, some outright staring at me like I was the unhinged one who had detonated a beautiful day. Aunt Laura walked beside me, calm, crisp, carrying a slim portfolio. She didn't smile, didn't nod. She just took her seat as if she were settling into a deposition rather than a family meeting. Diane was the first to speak. "Well," she said, hands folded, tone syrupy and sharp, "we're all here because we deserve an explanation, don't we? Yesterday was humiliating. People were left confused, hurt, embarrassed." Her gaze slid pointedly to me. "We would appreciate hearing why you chose to run away without warning, and why you thought it was appropriate to leave us with." She gave a tight laugh, non-refundable costs. The cousins murmured agreement. Someone said they'd never seen such behavior from a bride. My nails pressed into my palms, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't run away," I said. "I removed myself from a situation you all helped create." Across the table, Alex scoffed. "Come on, Hannah, don't start with." I held up the folder. "I brought something." The rustle of paper echoed louder than it should have as I handed out packets, page after page printed neatly, clipped in organized sets, the forged loan documents, the credit inquiry report, the screenshots of messages where Alex called me naive, dramatic, easy to manipulate, the room filled with shifting chairs and the soft scrape of paper. Alex's smirk faltered. Richard spoke first, voice booming. This is nothing, a clerical mix-up. You should have come to us instead of making a spectacle." "It's not a mix-up," Aunt Laura said, her tone cool and professional. "It's identity fraud. Someone used her signature, her personal information, and attempted to position her property trust as collateral. That trust prevents exactly this kind of exploitation." A ripple of whispers spread down the table. Diane stiffened. Richard waved a dismissive hand. "These things happen in development work. Paperwork moves fast, sometimes too fast." "This wasn't fast," I said. "It was deliberate." I reached into my bag again and placed the final set of documents in front of me before sliding copies outward toward my neighbors. The messages between Alex and V2 Hearts. Photos, timestamps, plans, nicknames that weren't mine, jokes about my good girl innocence, comments about how my credit score was useful, how marrying me meant the project would fly. The room changed instantly. The cousins who were glaring at me now stared at Alex instead. One aunt gasped and muttered something that sounded like disgusting. Even Diane's breath faltered, her eyes widening just enough to crack the polished facade. Alex's face went gray. Hannah, those are taken out of context. Which context? I asked. The part where you were using me financially, or the part where you were cheating on me while planning a wedding you knew wasn't real? Richard slammed his palm on the table. Enough, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I said, calm settling over me like a steady weight. You scheduled a family meeting, here it is. Aunt Laura closed her folder. You should all be aware the bank has already been contacted. Fraud notices are filed, credit agencies alerted, the trust remains intact. Alex looked at me like he didn't recognize who I was. Maybe he didn't. He'd spent months convincing me I was quiet, pliable, safe, and now I was sitting across from him with his entire scheme laid out like evidence. And as of today, I continued, I will not be marrying into a family that sees me as decoration or collateral. The silence was total. Then I slid the engagement ring across the table. It made a small, sharp sound against the wood, a sound that felt like finality. I stood, pushing my chair back with a soft scrape. I'm done, I said. And for the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I could breathe. The days after the wedding that wasn't felt strangely loud. Not with people in my apartment, no one came in person, but with the constant dinging, buzzing, vibrating of my phone. Every few minutes, another message, another opinion, another voice trying to tell me what my story was. Some messages were kind. Most weren't. Because Alex had gotten to them first. His version spread faster than the real one ever could. Screenshots of his posts got forwarded to me, paragraphs written in that polished, self-effacing tone he used whenever he wanted people to believe he was the mature one. Hannah panicked over some paperwork, nothing major. She gets overwhelmed easily. I guess she wasn't ready for commitment. Please keep her in your thoughts, she's going through a lot. A lot. He made my refusal to participate in fraud sound like a mental health crisis. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly crawled out of the digital woodwork. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Relationships are hard, you shouldn't have run. Couldn't this have been handled privately? Over paperwork, really. It amazed me how ready people W. Air to believe the man with the smooth voice and the tailored suits over the woman who had warned them nothing was as perfect as it looked. The worst messages were the ones prefaced with just being honest. They always are. By the end of the second night, my thumb was sore from scrolling, my chest tight with a strange mix of anger and humiliation. I knew if I tried to correct every rumor, I'd drown in them, so I took a different approach. I drafted a single message. Calm, short, measured. Hi, I won't be discussing private details, but since misinformation is spreading, I'm sharing redacted documents that clarify the situation. This is the only statement I'll make. Attached. The loan paperwork with the forged signature, names blurred. The credit report showing the unauthorized account, numbers partially obscured. A few screenshots of messages between Alex and V2 Hearts, including the lines about my credit score being useful and the project flying after the wedding, contact name hidden. I didn't add commentary. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't explain or plead. Just facts. The silence that followed was loud in its own way. People who had been typing essays the day before vanished from my inbox. Their chat bubbles popped up briefly, like they were starting to say something, then disappeared. A few sent apologies, long paragraphs about how they didn't know the whole story and shouldn't have taken sides. It was strange, realizing how quickly people default to the narrative that flatters the louder voice. Late that evening, my phone rang, not a text, a call. Evan. I almost didn't answer, afraid of what fresh fallout he might be caught in, but I swiped anyway. He sounded tired, not physically, emotionally, like he'd been living under the weight of his entire family's disappointment. They're furious with me, he said without preamble. My parents, Alex, all of them, they're saying I armed you and destroyed the wedding. Alex told our uncle I sabotaged him out of jealousy. My throat tightened. Evan, I'm so sorry. You don't need to be, he said. I'd do it again, I just wanted you to know I don't regret warning you, not for a second. His quiet loyalty hit me harder than all the accusations I'd endured. I hate that you're getting punished for their choices, I told him, but I'm done protecting Alex's image. He did this. He has to own it. My focus now is my credit, my property, and my peace, nothing else. There was a pause, soft rustling, as if he nodded on the other end. You deserve better than all of this, he said quietly. I'm glad you walked. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light of my living room, the glow of my phone screen fading to black. The apartment was still, the only sound the distant hum of traffic outside. I pulled a blanket around my shoulders and let myself breathe, slow, steady, deliberate. People could believe whatever they wanted, but the truth had already started its work. A few weeks later, I found myself in the same chair in Aunt Laura's office, the one by the window where the sunlight landed in a slanted stripe across the carpet. The place always smelled like dark roast coffee, printer ink, and paper, real paper, the thick legal kind that could change lives with a single signature. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug she'd pushed toward me, more for something to hold than anything else. My stomach had been in a tight knot since morning. They've officially launched a formal review, Aunt Laura said, adjusting her glasses as she scrolled through an email on her monitor. The bank is pulling every file tied to the Mason project. They've already flagged signature inconsistencies. I swallowed. My own forged name stared up at me from the manila folder on her desk. She tapped one page with the back of her pen. Their handwriting analyst compared this to your verified signature patterns. The slant is off, pressure inconsistent, and the letter loops don't match. I let out a shaky breath. It was surreal hearing someone describe my stolen handwriting like it was a crime scene, because it was. The door opened and a compliance officer stepped in, holding a notepad and a tablet. He had the quiet, precise manner of someone trained to observe more than he spoke. Ms. Walker, he said, nodding politely. I appreciate you coming in again. We just need a bit more detail on the personal information chain. The what? I asked. How your personal information, social security number, tax returns, pay stubs, ended up in Mason Development's possession. Heat flooded my face, shame sharp and sour. I glanced at Aunt Laura, but she just nodded, encouraging me to speak. My voice faltered. Alex asked for them years ago. He said he wanted to make a joint future planning folder, for down payments, for budgeting, for whatever couples did when they were serious, I guess. The compliance officer typed silently, no judgment on his face, just clinical attention, but hearing the words "Blee out" made my skin crawl. I'd given Alex everything. I'd handed over pieces of my life one form at a time, thinking it meant partnership, commitment, preparation. Instead, it had been an open door. And he'd walked right through it. I rubbed my forehead. I thought it was normal. I thought I was being responsible. Aunt Laura leaned toward me. And that's exactly why you're the victim here, not the participant. People in good faith relationships share financial information all the time. You didn't do anything wrong. But I still felt naive, exposed, like a child who wandered into traffic because she assumed everyone followed the rules. The officer thanked me, assured me they would continue analyzing, then left as quietly as he came. When the door clicked shut, Aunt Laura reached into her drawer and handed me a printout titled Financial Hygiene Checklist. Stay with it, she said. Continue the freezes, the written confirmations, the alerts. We need a clean paper trail of every step you're taking to protect yourself. I nodded. I turned into someone who checked her credit report more often than her email, someone who saved every message from every number, someone who read legal disclaimers twice. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. My phone buzzed. Evan. I stepped into the hallway to answer, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Hey, he said quietly. He always sounded tired these days, like he was talking from inside a storm. Just wanted to let you know auditors are all over Mason Developments. Internal, external, everyone. People are talking, whispering about irregularities, and not just with your file. A cold ripple slid down my spine, meaning what? He hesitated, meaning Alex didn't forge your name for just one reason. There are other numbers that aren't clean, other accounts that don't match, people are scared. The words settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't one lie, one moment of selfishness. It was a pattern, a structure held together by shortcuts and charm, slowly splintering under scrutiny. I'm sorry, he added quietly. I know this is a lot. It's not your fault, I said. You warned me. When I stepped outside a few minutes later, the wind cut across my cheeks, cold enough to sting. Cars rushed by on the street below, their exhaust mixing with the sharp winter air. For a long moment, I stood on the sidewalk with the case file tucked under my arm, watching the city move like nothing in it had changed. But everything had changed. Alex forged one signature. Just one. And it had knocked the first domino off a table he thought was bolted to the ground. Now his entire house of cards was shaking, and for the first time in weeks I felt steady. The conference room felt intentionally bland. Gray walls, gray carpet, a long laminate table that looked wiped too many times with industrial cleaner. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, cold and buzzing, the kind of light that made everyone look a little sick. I took a slow breath as I stepped inside, clutching the neatly organized folder Aunt Laura had prepared for me. What I didn't expect, what made my stomach flip, was that Alex and Richard were already seated across from the bank representatives. Seeing them in this sterile setting felt surreal, like two actors who had wandered into the wrong stage play. Alex looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, his hair slightly unbrushed, the buttons on his shirt misaligned by one notch. But as soon as his eyes met mine, he slipped on that soft, wounded expression, the one he used whenever he wanted sympathy. Richard, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to pound the table into dust. He sat rigid, chin jutting forward, hands clasped so tightly I could see the whites of his knuckles. Even from across the room, I could feel the force of his irritation. One of the bank's attorneys gestured for me to sit. Papers shuffled, chairs squeaked. The air felt almost too quiet, like everyone was waiting for someone else to start the fire. The lead attorney, a composed woman in her 40s with glasses perched low on her nose, cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming. We'll begin by reviewing the sequence of events." Her tone was calm, factual, an anchor in the tension. She started reading from a printed timeline. First, Ms. Walker's credit record, which had no recent inquiries or applications prior to the disputed account. Second, the loan application submitted by Mason Developments listing Ms. Walker as co-borrower. Third, the signature page, which shows noticeable inconsistencies with Ms. Walker's verified signature. Richard immediately leaned forward, because she rushed when she signed it. The attorney held up a hand without even looking at him. "Mr. Mason, you will have time to speak, but we have not reached that point." Richard's mouth snapped shut, but his glare didn't. She continued, "Next, Ms. Walker's prompt fraud report, and finally the trust documents protecting her separate property, specifically the duplex listed as potential collateral." I watched Alex shift in his seat, knee bouncing under the table. Richard didn't wait for permission this time. "She verbally agreed to help the project," he barked. "This is a personal dispute being blown out of proportion because the relationship ended. She's being." He paused deliberately. "Hysterical." The word echoed in the sterile room, landing like a slap. My jaw tightened, but before I could respond, the bank attorney beat me to it. "Even if Ms. Walker had verbally agreed," she said smoothly, "that does not justify forging her signature or using her personal identifying information without clear, documented consent. The law does not recognize hysterical as a basis for fraud." A couple of the bank reps exchanged tight smiles. Richard's face turned a deeper shade of red. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice strained. I thought she knew," he said, eyes flicking toward me like he was hoping I'd nod and save him. "It was just a shortcut. I meant for both of us to benefit. I wasn't trying to hurt her." "A shortcut?" That was what he called stealing my identity. "I figured once we were married," he went on, "everything would fall into place. It would have worked out." "Mr. Mason," the attorney interrupted, "you understand that intent does not mitigate the violation. Whether you meant well or not is irrelevant to the legality." Alex's mouth opened, then closed, his face folding into frustration. His script, the charming, remorseful fiancé routine, wasn't landing here. Not under fluorescent lights, not under scrutiny, not against hard documents and timestamps. The meeting wrapped with a crisp summary from the bank. They would unwind my involvement in the loan entirely. They would flag the case as fraud. And they were reserving the right to pursue further action against Mason Developments based on the emerging pattern. I felt something loosen in my chest, like a thread finally slipping free. Richard muttered under his breath. Alex stared at the table. Neither met my eyes as I stood to leave. But the bank attorney did. "Ms. Walker," she said, handing me a printed confirmation, "this document shows you are officially separated from the account. You are not responsible for any portion of the loan." I folded it carefully, holding it like something fragile and powerful at the same time. When I walked out of the building, the cold air hit my face, waking me fully. My legs felt steady, not because everything was fixed, but because this part at least was done. I was no longer tethered to their mess. And for the first time, they were the ones standing under the microscope. Months later, I was curled up on my thrift store couch, sunlight drifting through the blinds in thin, warm lines, when my phone buzzed with a notification from the local business journal. I almost ignored it. News about real estate had become background noise ever since I'd yanked myself out of the Mason orbit. But the headlines snapped me straight upright. Mason Developments under investigation for fraudulent practices. My coffee went cold in my hands as I tapped the article open. The screen lit my living room in a harsh glow, reflecting in the window like a warning flare. They named my case. Not explicitly, not with my full details, but the description was unmistakable. A forged co-borrower signature. A protected property trust referenced as future collateral. A fiancé who discovered the fraud on the wedding day. But the article didn't stop there. It hinted at other projects, other loans, other numbers that didn't line up. Someone inside the company had turned whistleblower, submitting anonymous documentation that suggested the fraud didn't start or end with me. I took a shaky breath. My apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too still. My phone buzzed again, this time a text. Evan, it's out. Another message followed. I'm cooperating and I moved out, couldn't keep pretending. I stared at the text for a long moment. Relief, sadness, something like gratitude. He hadn't owed me anything, not after the wedding imploded, not after his family turned on him, but he still chose the truth. Outside, a car honked. Somewhere above me, my upstairs neighbor stomped across their living room. Life kept moving, indifferent to the collapse happening downtown. Throughout the day, more articles appeared. Screenshots forwarded by coworkers, former classmates, even nosy acquaintances who pretended they were just checking in. Each report dug deeper. Clients quietly pulling out. A mid-sized investor filing a lawsuit. Former employees whispering about doctored projections and creative accounting. Photos surfaced, 2 paparazzi-style shots of Alex leaving the office. He looked hollow, his eyes darting to avoid cameras, hair uncombed, shoulders slumped like he was shrinking under the weight of a life coming undone. Richard stepped down as CEO under the vague excuse of health reasons, but every article had tea. He same subtle undertone, no one believes this spin. The comments under one article were brutal, industry people hinting that they'd suspected something for years, that deals with the Masons always felt off, that the wedding scandal had been the first crack in a facade they'd polished for decades. The same acquaintances who once told me I owed the family an apology were now messaging me. Wow, I had no idea. This is insane, I'm so sorry for what you went through. We've stopped working with them, obviously. One even added, good for you for getting out when you did. Funny how people switch sides when the tide does. I wasn't happy about any of it, not exactly. Happiness wasn't the right word, but there was a strange, steady calm in me as I watched everything unfold from the safety of my small, imperfect apartment. A calm that came from knowing the truth was finally louder than the stories they'd tried to spin. Alex had gambled with my name, my future, my trust. Now his own name was the one unraveling. Near dusk, as warm orange light filtered through my blinds, an envelope slid through my mail slot. I opened it on the kitchen counter. The paper smelled faintly of toner and fresh print. It was an official notice from the bank. My credit fully restored. My name removed from all Mason-related debt. My file marked victim of identity fraud. My shoulders sagged as I exhaled, long, shaky, almost disbelieving. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself until that moment. It felt like closing a door on a burning building. A building I had walked out of just in time. And outside my window, life kept moving, but now it was finally moving without their fingerprints on my future. A year later, my duplex didn't look anything like the faded little building my grandmother left me. Fresh paint, soft cream with navy trim made it glow in the afternoon sun. The new tenants kept the porch tidy, and the small herb garden I planted along the walkway smelled like basil and rosemary every time I brushed past it. When I came home from work, the whole place carried this warm mix of coffee grounds and greenery, like a space that finally belonged to someone who cared for it. My job was different too. I'd left the old firm and taken a position as a risk analyst at a regional bank. The irony wasn't lost on me. After surviving financial deceit up close, I now got paid to spot the red flags in other people's paperwork. The training had come from experience I never asked for, but it made me sharper, clearer, less willing to be talked out of what I saw. Sometimes coworkers joked that I was paranoid in a useful way. I'd laugh because it didn't sting, not anymore. There's a difference between fear and awareness, and I'd finally learned where that line lived in my body. One warm Saturday evening, Jade and I sat on my tiny balcony with cheap wine and mismatched chairs, scrolling through our phones while the traffic hummed below us. A breeze pushed at the hanging planter above us, releasing the scent of mint. Did you see this? Jade asked, turning her screen to me. It was a post announcing that Alex had relocated to Start Fresh, complete with a polished headshot, one of those corporate photos designed to look humble and confident at the same time. The comments were a mix of supportive acquaintances and people politely hinting at the scandal without naming it. "He looks older," Jade said, squinting. "He is older," I answered, taking a sip of wine. "Older and not my problem." And I meant it. There was no bitterness left in me, just distance, like looking at a city I used to live in but didn't miss. His life, his excuses, his consequences, none of them sat on my shoulders anymore. I'd stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Aunt Laura came by later that week with a leather-bound folder and her laptop. She spread everything out across my kitchen table, the papers smoothing under her palms with that soft, whispering sound of crisp documents unfolding. "Ready for the next step?" she asked, eyes warm behind her glasses. I nodded. Using a mix of my savings and the duplex's rental income, I was about to buy a modest second property. A small, sturdy place on the edge of a growing neighborhood, nothing flashy, nothing fragile. She walked me through every line of the contract, each clause, each number. This time I wasn't scared of what might be hiding between lines. I knew what questions to ask, I knew what missing signatures looked like, and I knew exactly who had my back. When we went to the title office, the bright overhead lights reflected off the polished conference table, casting sharp edges on everything. The notary slid the papers toward me. The pen felt heavier in my hand than it should have, like it carried the weight of every mistake and every lesson I'd survived. But my signature was steady. My name, in my handwriting, on my terms. As the final page clicked into the binder, a quiet, fierce pride bloomed in my chest, something warm and grounded, not the airy excitement I'd once mistaken for love or security. This time, my future wasn't tied to anyone else's ambition. This time, the lines with my name on them were put there by me for me. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The night before closing on my new property, I lay in bed with the window cracked open just enough to let the city drift in distant sirens, a passing bus sighing at the stop down the block, someone laughing on the sidewalk 2 floors below. The sounds curled softly into my room, settling over me like a blanket instead of a threat. My heart wasn't pounding. It wasn't even fluttering. It was steady, quiet, and grounded in a way I didn't recognize from the woman I'd been a year ago. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the faint glow of streetlights shifting through the blinds. And without meaning to, my mind played an old memory beside the present one, 2 nights, 2 versions of me. Back then, the night before my almost wedding, I stood in a hotel hallway shaking so hard my knees nearly buckled. My palms were sweating, my breath shallow, my voice barely able to form words as Evan warned me I was on the brink of losing everything. The carpet smelled like bleach and spilled champagne. People laughed just feet away while my entire life tilted on its axis. Tonight, the air smelled like lavender laundry detergent and my own pillow. And I wasn't shaking, because this time I knew exactly what I owned. Exactly what was protected. Exactly who I was. My fingers slid across the comforter, soft and worn from 100 washes. I thought about the girl in the hotel room, the one in a white dress, eyes red from panic, hair sprayed into a bridal helmet while people told her she was dramatic, ungrateful, childish, all for daring to ask questions about paperwork with her name on it. Paperwork that could have ruined her. I wanted to reach back in time and hold her face in my hands, tell her she wasn't crazy, that her instincts were sharper than she knew. That fear is sometimes the first sign you're standing in the wrong place. Today, I know this. The moment someone tries to make you feel unstable for protecting yourself is the moment you walk away, no matter how many invitations have been mailed or how many deposits you can't get back. My revenge had never been fire and destruction. It had never been about Alex or his parents being dragged through public humiliation. My revenge was simple. Their lies never touched my future. Their fingerprints never made it onto my credit. Their signatures never sat beside mine again. That was enough. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, a soft vibration in the dark. I reached for it, thumb brushing the screen. A message from Evan. "I'm happy for you, truly. Getting out when you did probably saved both of us in different ways." I stared at the text for a long moment, warmth blooming in my chest. Not romantic warmth, something steadier, quieter, gratitude, respect. The kind that grows between two people who crawled out of the same wreckage and learned how to breathe again. I set the phone down and rolled onto my side, the sheets cool against my skin. The city hummed on, a low, steady rhythm under my window. My eyes drifted shut as I thought of that first warning in the hotel hallway, the way my legs shook, the way the world tilted and I felt myself slipping. Now when my legs shake, it's from something else entirely, the weight of the keys I hold in my own hands, keys to doors I'm choosing to walk through, keys to a future no one else can sign me into. Tomorrow, I would close on a home that was mine. Not ours. Not his. Mine. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept.